What if I told you the behavior you think is normal in your relationships might actually be a slow betrayal of your identity? Carl Jung himself warned that tolerating these hidden behaviors could destroy your sense of self. Why do you let it happen? It's a question that lingers, often unspoken, especially when someone crosses a line you barely noticed. Maybe they dismissed your feelings as if they didn't matter. Maybe their criticism came wrapped in soft words, disguised as advice or care, and you nodded along, even though it stung. How often have you tolerated words or behaviors that left you doubting yourself just because they came from someone you trust, someone you love? Somewhere along the way, we've been taught that these moments are normal. We've been told to let it go, to keep the peace, to assume good intentions no matter how much something hurts. But have you ever paused to ask, what if normal is just another word for ignoring harm? The truth is, manipulation often hides behind concern. It enters your life wearing a friendly face, whispering phrases like, "I'm only saying this for your own good," or "I know what's best for you." At first, it's easy to believe those words. They sound caring, even protective. But what's really happening? You hesitate to question it because the surface feels soft, not sharp. Over time, though, you notice how it chips away at your ability to trust your instincts. These words aren't about helping you. They're about control. They reframe your choices and needs, creating space for someone else's preferences to replace your boundaries. Picture this. You say no to something, politely, even firmly, but then comes the sigh, the head tilt, and the response you dread. If you really loved me, you'd reconsider. I just want what's best for us. Don't you understand that? Suddenly, you're questioning yourself. Maybe you're overreacting. Maybe saying no really was selfish. Without realizing it, you feel compelled to give in, not because you've changed your mind, but because the guilt feels unbearable. This isn't love or kindness. It's manipulation disguised as care. It plants seeds of self-doubt, and soon enough, you've stopped trusting your decisions and the feelings that led to them. This pattern doesn't stop with one moment. Over time, it builds. You start apologizing for things you didn't do. You question whether your emotions are valid. You stop asserting your boundaries, fearing the conflict it might cause. Slowly, it erodes something fundamental, your connection to your own identity. You tell yourself it's easier this way, that they mean well. But deep down, something feels wrong. That discomfort is your inner self reminding you that you're tolerating what you shouldn't. Consider the small, everyday ways this happens. Maybe you share an idea, but it's brushed off with, "Oh, that's not practical. Let's do it my way instead." Or you express a preference, only to hear, "But this is better for both of us. Trust me." These moments send a quiet message. Your thoughts, your choices, your feelings don't carry the same weight. It's subtle, not a sharp attack, but it steers you in their direction, making you believe it's where you wanted to go all along. The longer this continues, the harder it becomes to recognize. Manipulation thrives on confusion, making you second-guess yourself. You'll hear, "You're making this a bigger deal than it is," or "Why are you always so defensive?" And instead of standing your ground, you retreat, convincing yourself they might be right. If they're calm and you're upset, maybe the problem is you. But let's be clear, this isn't about them helping you. It's about them positioning themselves as the authority over your choices, your feelings, and your reality. Each time you accept it, you trade a piece of your authenticity for their approval. And here's the cost. Every time you doubt yourself because of this manipulation, it weakens the most important relationship you'll ever have, the one with yourself. Your sense of autonomy fades. That inner voice, the one that knows what you want and value, grows quieter. It's not just about the discomfort in the moment. It leaves behind a version of you that feels smaller, less confident, and more disconnected. Now think about this. What you've been tolerating might not be love or concern at all. It might be control disguised as affection. Recognizing this isn't about blaming yourself. It's about seeing clearly for the first time, understanding the chains that have been there all along, and realizing they only stay in place with your acceptance. This is just one example of the subtle ways harm creeps into our lives. These small acts, whether in words, actions, or dynamics, can go unnoticed for years, but their impact runs deep. The good news? Every moment of awareness is a chance to choose differently. And with that awareness comes the first step toward reclaiming your freedom. Have you ever laughed at a joke that left a knot in your stomach? Maybe it was subtle, barely enough to make you flinch, but still, you felt it, a sting hiding underneath the laughter. And yet, you smiled, maybe even chuckled along, because saying something would make things awkward, right? That's the power of humor when it's weaponized. It digs into you softly, leaving marks that don't look like wounds, at least not at first. We've been trained to think humor is harmless, something to shrug off, even when there's nothing funny about it. Humiliating someone under the guise of a joke is far from harmless. It's a calculated way to put someone in their place without the backlash of outright criticism. A quick, mocking jab about how you're too sensitive, too awkward, or not good enough, all wrapped in a laugh, ensures the joker avoids accountability. And if you take it personally, the response is predictable. Relax, it's just a joke. Suddenly, you're not only the target, but also the one overreacting. The spotlight shifts to you, painting you as unreasonable for not laughing along. Weaponized humor is like a double-edged blade. On the surface, it seems light-hearted, but it cuts deep, leaving invisible scars on your sense of self. Repeated jokes at your expense chip away at your confidence, one laugh at a time. They signal to you and everyone else that you're the easy target, the one who doesn't quite belong. And here's what many don't realize. The unconscious mind doesn't distinguish between what's said in jest and what's said in earnest. As humor researcher Carl Jung noted, every word carries weight, even when it's tossed out casually. So, while you might laugh on the outside, your mind absorbs the insult, internalizing it as part of your reality. Think about how this plays out over time. You're with friends, family, or coworkers, and someone makes a joke about your quirks or mistakes. Maybe it's about how you look, talk, or something trivial you did. It feels uncomfortable, but you laugh along, telling yourself not to ruin the mood. That's how it starts. A small moment, a single comment. But then it happens again and again. Slowly, you notice a pattern. You're always the punchline. Each time, it undermines another layer of your self-esteem. This kind of subtle mockery often serves one purpose: to diminish you while elevating someone else. People who rely on these jokes are often projecting their own insecurities. By putting you down in front of others, they gain a fleeting sense of control or superiority. But that doesn't make their words any less harmful. Regardless of intent, the repeated act of being mocked sends the same message. You're not good enough, and everyone can see it. Here's the tricky part. Humor is socially charged. If you call the joker out, you risk being labeled as someone who can't take a joke. The focus shifts from what they said to how you reacted. This is why weaponized humor works so effectively. It creates a social trap. Your choices are to either laugh along and let the insult sink deeper, or speak up and risk being accused of ruining the fun. Either way, you lose. Over time, this dynamic can have lasting psychological effects. Imagine being the target of these jokes repeatedly. Eventually, you stop trusting your value in the eyes of others. Maybe you change your behavior, trying not to stand out, hoping to avoid giving anyone material to use against you. But dulling your shine to avoid being laughed at is a quiet form of self-betrayal. It's a way of abandoning your true self to fit into a social hierarchy where someone else always holds the power. And while it might be tempting to brush off those jokes, reminding yourself that it's not a big deal, the truth is, even if you laugh, the damage is done. Just as your unconscious mind doesn't separate humor from reality, the people around you don't either. The more often they mock you without consequence, the more their perception of you shifts. A joke becomes a narrative, a false one, that they attach to your name. Worse, you might start believing it too. It's easy to tell yourself you're being too sensitive or overthinking it, but sensitivity isn't the problem here. The real issue is the harm caused by a dynamic where you're expected to laugh along just to keep the peace. That forced compliance isn't harmless. It's a form of self-betrayal. Every time you laugh at a joke that leaves you feeling small, you send yourself a message. My feelings don't matter as much as keeping others comfortable. That's the real harm. And it's a cycle that only ends when you recognize it for what it is and decide to stop playing along. But this is just one way subtle betrayals can take hold. Not all of them come wrapped in laughter. Some, like gaslighting, are far quieter and harder to detect. Let's explore how those moments can erode your connection to your truth. Imagine this. You're in a conversation that starts off normal, maybe even calm, but it doesn't take long before something feels off. You bring up a concern, a question, or even a memory, and then, instead of being heard, you're told, "That's not what happened." A few more minutes pass, and now you're the one on the defensive, trying to prove that your emotions, your recollection of events, and even your intentions are real. You always overreact, they say. Though you know, deep down, that what you're feeling is valid, a small voice in your head whispers, "But what if they're right?" And just like that, you begin to doubt yourself. That's gaslighting, a deliberate form of emotional manipulation designed to make you question your own reality and trust in yourself. At its core, gaslighting is about power and control. The goal is to make you second-guess your perceptions so completely that you rely on someone else to define what's true. Therapist Janica Veasley describes it as a tactic that makes you question your sanity, experiences, and reality. It's calculated and deeply harmful, leaving you disconnected from your own intuition. Gaslighters often use specific phrases to achieve this. For example, "That's not what I said. You must have misunderstood me." Or, "You're just imagining things. It didn't happen that way." One of the most damaging? "You're being too sensitive. You always make things about you." These comments twist your perception and make it harder to trust yourself. When they come from someone you care about, the effect is amplified. Why would someone close to you lie? Instead of holding on to your reality, you begin to question it, convincing yourself that maybe the problem isn't them. Maybe it's you. Gaslighting is like a dense fog that slowly settles over your mind, clouding your ability to trust your feelings, memories, and intuition. This fog doesn't appear all at once. It builds gradually, so subtly that you might not notice it until you're completely surrounded. Imagine a conversation where you clearly remember someone making a promise. Later, when you bring it up, they calmly say, "I never said that." You're sure they did, but their calm denial leaves you doubting yourself. Over time, you start questioning your memory and hesitating to bring things up at all. In that space of doubt, they gain control. Another tactic gaslighters use is minimizing your emotions. Say you're upset about something hurtful they've done. Instead of acknowledging your feelings, they dismiss them with comments like, "Why are you so dramatic?" or "It's not that serious." These phrases don't just invalidate your emotions, they shift the narrative, making it seem like your reaction is the problem, not their behavior. When this happens repeatedly, you start suppressing your feelings, convincing yourself they aren't valid. It's not because you don't care, it's because you've been made to believe your emotions are wrong. The effects of gaslighting run deep. Over time, it erodes your connection to yourself. You stop trusting your perspective, lose confidence in your ability to make decisions, and second-guess your experiences. This self-doubt doesn't stay contained, it spills into every part of your life. You hesitate before speaking up, question your instincts, and feel disconnected from your truth. Here's the harsh reality. Gaslighting isn't accidental, it's intentional. It's a way to maintain control by breaking down your ability to trust yourself. The longer it continues, the harder it becomes to see through the fog. You start focusing on fixing yourself, trying harder, communicating differently, being less sensitive, instead of recognizing the real problem, the manipulation. But recognizing gaslighting is the first step to breaking free. Once you can name it, you start to see it for what it is, a tactic designed to keep you off balance. When someone tells you, "You're imagining things," remind yourself, "No, I'm not." When they dismiss your feelings, silently reaffirm, "My emotions matter." These small acts of self-reclamation are like clearing patches of the fog, letting light in. This process isn't easy, and it doesn't happen overnight. But the more you reconnect with your truth and stop tolerating behaviors that distort it, the clearer things become. Gaslighting thrives in silence, but once you name it, it begins to lose its power. Still, gaslighting is just one way others can chip away at your emotions and sense of self. What happens when your feelings are dismissed entirely? Let's explore the quieter but equally harmful tactic of emotional invalidation. Have you ever been told to calm down when you were anything but calm? Maybe it was during an argument or when you were overwhelmed and just needed someone to listen. Those two words, calm down, can feel like a slap in the face, invalidating what you're experiencing in that moment. It's not just frustrating, it's hurtful. And if it happens often enough, it starts to reshape the way you see your own emotions. This is emotional invalidation, a subtle yet powerful way of diminishing your feelings. It's that moment when you're told, "You're overreacting," or "It's not a big deal," as if your emotions are too much to handle or even unwarranted. Maybe you've tried opening up about feeling hurt, only to hear, "You're being dramatic," or "Why are you even upset about this?" These comments might sound harmless at first, but their impact is profound. They send the message over and over again that your emotions are inconvenient, exaggerated, or even ridiculous. When this happens repeatedly, you start to internalize it. You might stop sharing how you feel altogether, thinking, "Why bother? No one will understand." Or worse, you begin to question your own emotions, wondering if they really are as out of place as others make them seem. But repressing your feelings doesn't make them go away. It's like sealing them inside a pressure cooker. The more you push them down, the more they build, until eventually they find a way to escape, often in ways you don't expect. Think of it this way: when emotions are suppressed, they don't disappear, they transform. Anxiety might creep in, keeping you awake at night. Unexplained anger might bubble to the surface, leaving you confused about its source. Even physical symptoms, headaches, exhaustion, or a constant sense of tension, can emerge. The energy it takes to suppress your emotions doesn't just vanish, it's redirected, echoing through your body and mind, demanding to be acknowledged. In moments of emotional invalidation, the damage begins subtly. You express something important only to be met with dismissal. Maybe someone says, "You're blowing this out of proportion," and for a second, you believe them. You second-guess yourself, wondering, "Am I overreacting? Was this not as important as I thought?" This self-doubt doesn't stay confined to that moment. Over time, it chips away at your confidence, making you question whether your feelings are ever valid. This erosion of trust in your own emotions doesn't just affect how you see yourself, it affects your relationships. When others consistently dismiss your feelings, you start to believe they don't matter. And by extension, you begin to feel like you don't matter. Emotions are deeply tied to your sense of self. They reflect what's happening within you at the core. To dismiss them is to disconnect from yourself, piece by piece. When you lose that connection, it doesn't just hurt your self-esteem, it creates a kind of internal prison. You stop feeling free to express yourself authentically. You might even start living by someone else's rules, someone else's standards for what deserves attention or care. And that's where loneliness sets in. Not just the loneliness of physical isolation, but the loneliness of being unseen, unheard, and disconnected from your true self. Relationships suffer in this dynamic too. It's impossible to feel close to someone who treats your emotions as a burden. Dismissive comments like, "You're overthinking it," or "That's ridiculous," don't just sting in the moment. They erode trust and intimacy over time. They create an environment where open communication feels impossible, leaving you questioning whether you even deserve emotional space. But here's the truth. Your emotions were never the problem. It's the dismissal of them that causes harm. Suppressing your feelings might seem like the easier option in the short term, but it comes at a steep cost. It disconnects you from who you are and leaves you living a life of silence rather than expression. That silence doesn't bring peace. It only deepens the divide between you and your authentic self. Reclaiming your emotional space doesn't mean fighting every instance of invalidation. It means recognizing that your emotions are valid signals, not inconveniences. Listening to them is an act of self-care, a way of respecting yourself. When you honor your feelings, you're not being dramatic or selfish. You're acknowledging your worth. And that's the foundation for living authentically, no matter what others might say. What price would you pay to belong? For many, it's far more than they realize. It starts small, a compromise here, a sacrifice there. Maybe you let someone talk over you in conversations because you don't want to seem difficult. Maybe you start agreeing to things you don't really want, convincing yourself you're just being accommodating. Over time, these small concessions pile up, like grains of sand filling a sinking pit. What began as a relationship of mutual respect shifts, tilting into imbalance. Your needs are overshadowed by the demands of the other person, and the mistreatment that once felt jarring becomes something you tolerate, even expect. It's easier to adapt than to risk the pain of being alone, so you stay, twisting truths about yourself to make the relationship survivable. This is the ultimate betrayal, abandoning yourself in exchange for a fragile sense of belonging. Manipulation and invalidation gradually pave the way until you find yourself tolerating outright contempt. A partner, friend, or family member speaks to you with condescension, disregards your feelings, or dismisses your worth, and you tell yourself, maybe this is just how they love. You justify their actions, even when the disrespect becomes glaring, because the thought of walking away feels heavier than the weight of staying. Carl Jung described this as a psychic death, the moment when you prioritize survival in a toxic relationship over your own well-being. You adapt to the mistreatment, suppressing the instincts that once tried to protect you. You stop questioning their behavior, excusing the belittling remarks and invalidation of your feelings. It becomes easier to tell yourself this is normal than to face the unsettling truth. This is not love. It never was. When you accept contempt in exchange for connection, you are surrendering yourself. You silence the small voice inside that whispers, "You deserve more," because listening to it threatens the stability of the relationship you're clinging to. What feels like survival is actually emotional starvation. Piece by piece, your happiness, confidence, and autonomy wither under the weight of contempt disguised as love. Think about how this happens. It's not a sudden decision to tolerate mistreatment. It's a slow erosion of your boundaries. At first, you push back against hurtful comments or disrespect, but when your feelings are dismissed again and again, you start to wonder if maybe they're right. Maybe you're too sensitive. Maybe it's not as bad as it feels. So you stop speaking up as much. You rationalize their behavior as jokes or quirks. Over time, the pattern repeats until the disrespect blends into the background, becoming part of what you convince yourself is normal. Societal pressures often reinforce this normalization of self-abandonment. How often are people praised for being selfless, for putting others first, even at the expense of their own needs? This kind of sacrifice is celebrated as a virtue, but in reality, constant self-sacrifice is destructive. It teaches you that your worth lies in how much you can endure for others, even if it means erasing your own voice. The world might applaud your willingness to give, but inside, you're left feeling hollow, disconnected from who you once were. Codependency often plays a role in this dynamic. One person becomes overly reliant on others for validation, prioritizing their needs while neglecting their own. It's not a conscious choice, it's a survival mechanism. You take on the role of caretaker or martyr, believing that if you just give enough, things will improve. But they don't. The more you bend to accommodate someone else's disrespect, the more trapped you become, losing the ability to advocate for yourself. Disrespect doesn't just hurt in the moment, it leaves lasting scars. Every harsh word, every condescending look, every crossed boundary tells you the same story. You're not worth more than this. And the more you accept it, the more deeply that narrative embeds itself into your mind. You start believing it's just the way things are. Contempt isn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's quieter, more insidious. It's the partner who mocks you subtly, comparing you to others to make you feel inadequate. It's the friend who constantly criticizes your choices under the guise of helping. Their words may not sound as cruel as they feel because they're calculated to undermine you without provoking confrontation. Over time, this quiet belittling erodes your sense of worth, convincing you that the problem isn't their behavior, it's you. But here's the truth. Accepting contempt isn't survival, it's surrender. It's not the price you need to pay to belong, and it's certainly not love. True connection doesn't require you to sacrifice your dignity or endure mistreatment just to avoid being alone. Belonging means being accepted as you are, whole, with boundaries and self-respect intact. The good news? It's never too late to reclaim yourself. The first step is recognizing this pattern for what it is, a slow descent into self-abandonment, driven by the fear of being alone. But being alone, even at its hardest, will never cost you as much as staying in a relationship that forces you to lose yourself. You don't have to keep paying this price. You are worth more than enduring mistreatment disguised as connection. And the path back to yourself begins with honoring the voice inside that says, "Enough."